Hello everyone and welcome to the webinar on offshore technical support. We're going to start in just a couple of minutes. We are hoping that everybody has a chance to join us, so just hold on and we'll start within 3 minutes. Thank you. For attendees who just joined, we will start in 1 minute. Welcome everybody. Welcome to this webinar on offshore technical support. We are ready to start. So let me start with some basic housekeeping. If you're having any trouble at all with the webinar, there is a way that you can reach tech support for Citrix Online. The password is on the screen. It's also included in the invitation that you got for the webinar, so I'm hoping nobody will need to use it, but if you do, please go ahead and call them for help. Second, in order to have better sound quality for everybody, we actually have a call where attendees are muted and only presenters can actually speak up in the conference call. Therefore, since we do welcome your questions, we encourage you to pose them in the chat window that will be part of your control panel. So write down anything that you have in mind here, and I will be the one who actually looks at these things and filters them and passes them on. And with that, let's introduce ourselves. I am Francoise of FT. I'm the owner of FT Works. FT Works is a consulting company. What we do is we help technology companies set up and improve their support operations. I like to say that we work along the 5 layers of support. So it starts at defining offerings, what's the promise that we make to our customers, defining the processes that are required to deliver against the promise, dealing with any organizational or people issues, so that's the focus of this webinar, right, that would come into play, and finally tools and metrics. I have also written a number of books, in particular The Art of Software Support, and I very much look forward to presenting here with Sath. Sath, you want to introduce yourself?
Surely. My full name is Sathyanarayan. I'm the President of Global Development Consulting. Much similar to Francoise, my company provides consulting services to solve offshore outsourcing issues. Work with a number of companies of various sizes, but our focus is on how do you get started and how do you manage your ongoing offshore effort. We focus upon 3 areas: technical support, which is the topic today. The other 2 areas are product development, IT services. And what we do is to look at the processes that are required for offshore outsourcing to be successful. Sometimes it looks intuitive and easy, but in reality I find that a number of companies have varying level of challenges, and that's what I help address. And I've written a book on offshore outsourcing best practices that you can look it up on our website. And I've been at it since about 2001 in this consulting capacity, but I got started in offshore outsourcing doing pioneering work at Tandem Computers about 20 years ago. With that, back to you, Francoise.
All right, so the reason why Sath is here is to answer my complaints. No. The reason why Sath is here is because when I work with my clients, I get a litany of, let's call them politely, challenges with offshore support. Now, this could be when my clients have an offshore support center that is composed of badged employees but just located far away, right? Or it could be because they're working with an outsourcer that is also located offshore. And this is basically a fairly typical list of what I hear. So problem number 1, I would say the most common concern that I hear is concerns around customer satisfaction. So it could be in the form of, well, you know, if a case is handled here onshore in the U.S., on the average, we get customer sat ratings of 8.6, 9, something like that, but offshore we've never managed to get to that level. Or it could be along the lines of we have a target internally of, let's say, 8 out of 10 on the customer sat survey, and regularly the offshore operation just misses that. Maybe not by a whole lot, but misses. So that's the most common complaint that I get, most common concern. Now, people obviously try to figure out, why is that happening, right? So often they mention that there are accent issues. So these issues could be reported by customers directly, but they're also reported by the internal staff when they are communicating in escalation situations with people located offshore. They mention it's just difficult to communicate, to understand each other. Mostly in speaking, but sometimes in writing, because some of the constructions are maybe not standard. I also hear a whole lot about turnover. We all know if we are supporting complex products that it takes quite a number of months for people to get comfortable delivering tech support. And it seems that the minute that they are competent, then people move on to something else, right? So high turnover obviously is going to create issues. Now beyond that, I also see, when I look at the metrics, I see a productivity shortfall. What I mean by that is if people onshore are able to solve, let's say, an average of 3 cases a day, right? And that could be high or low for you, but I'm just giving that as an example. Well, the people offshore can only do maybe 2 on a good day. Right? So there's a difference in productivity, and people are kind of scratching their head as to why that could be happening. Moreover, I get a lot of feedback around what I characterized here as lack of vendor innovation and initiative, and that's maybe a little unfair and harsh the way it's worded here, but what I'm hearing is, you know, we have all these problems. We have turnover, and we have lower productivity and all of that, and it seems that the offshore operation isn't really working very hard on these things. Now, they could be working hard, right, but the results are just not seen, and the perception is they just do what we tell them to do, and we want them to really invent new ways of doing things that would resolve some of the problems that we are seeing. And overall, people, including people who were rather excited about going into the offshoring business, are coming back to me and saying, you know, we're not sure it was worth it in the end. It's costing us a lot more than we thought. Probably because the forecasts were not very exact, but let's not stay there. Right? So it's costing us more. We have to send people over there much more than we thought for training and just general management help. We have a lot of coordination overhead that we did not anticipate, and the return in terms of customer sat or productivity or whatever just is not quite where we thought it would be. So we are just not getting to the level that we were expecting. So this is my laundry list, and Sath has promised that he's going to solve it all for us. So,
Francois, I wish I could wave a magic wand and solve all these things in one silver bullet. I'm afraid there is bad news for you. There is no
well, you
one.
have 20 plus slides to do it, so good luck.
So I wish there was one silver bullet, but there isn't. So here is what I have done, though. What I have done, however, is to take a look at a whole number of case studies and a number of implementations that I've helped with, and I come up with a range of possible solutions. And no one size fits all, and no one particular silver bullet will solve all of these issues. And as you know, it's all situation dependent. So what I'm going to try and do is to share with you guys things that I have seen work, and it will not be a one-to-one solution to the list that Francois just presented in here. So it would be some combination of these various solutions. So let's get on with the show here. So here are some thoughts. The first thing that I hear when I talk to VPs in support is, gosh, Sath, this thing isn't really working out. Should I bring the whole thing back, or should I replace the vendor? So these are some of the potential solutions they think about. And I want to start off this discussion here by thinking about maybe you should bring some work back. Why am I saying that? So let's take a look at this. See there, Francois talked about communication issues, accent, and so on. Those things are there. People try hard at accent neutralization and so on, and those will have some success. But I kind of want to open up this dialogue to something larger than that. Rather than saying the vendor isn't doing their job, I come at it as a look, this is a partnership between the vendor and you who is outsourcing the project offshore. But let's take a look at what projects have you outsourced to start with, or offshore is a better way to put it. Quite often what I find is people say, well, I have a call center here. I'll set up a call center in Philippines, India, or any other place, and I expect it to work pretty nearly the same thing that I'm doing right here. So this is an issue of project selection and expectation management, so to speak. So what I have found a better success rate is not to start off with voice-based projects, if you will, but those projects that they need to, number one, carefully pay attention to what goes offshore and actually manage the process and put some thought into it, put some effort into it. Now, I would submit to you that you should look at email and chat and web-based support as the first series of projects or product support that you take offshore and get your feet wet. Perhaps you start out with begin to do this with level 1 issues and fundamentally get the process rolling and get them trained, them within your offshore partner, and that seems to go. The latency is the voice issues go away, at least in the beginning. And if you start that way and spend 3 to 6 months, and you both get familiar and they get the understanding of your products, etc., and over time you can decide whether you want to move voice-based support also. So the other things that I find even after somebody has been offshoring for years together is there is a huge lack of understanding of each other's cultures and the way they operate. What do I mean by that? The same words would mean different. Francois talked about not only the tech support agents offshore talking to the clients and having issues with that, but staff here talking to the staff offshore also having issues with that. So this is a really broad subject in its own right, and we can spend a lot of time on it, but I do want to point out there are cultural differences here, and both parties should really get to know each other's culture and what things really mean. I'll give you a very quick example here. This may not be true in every case, but I found this quite often. We in the US are quite used to saying, look, I want this ASAP. Now, a lot of people understand it, but I still run into people who don't understand the acronym ASAP, and we want it immediately right away, but ASAP to somebody else offshore may not have the same sense of urgency that we understand. So, summary on this slide, you may actually want to look at what is offshore and set up very thoughtful project selection criteria, and you may decide, hey, some of these particular projects don't make sense offshore. Let me bring it onshore for a while, and then over time I will ramp that up offshore once the other things are proven. Francois talked about innovation as one of the topics, right? So getting vendors to innovate. Let me go back here for a second here. I find that typically here is what happens. The most common model in which people operate is the time and F or the staff augmentation model. The model is, okay, I need 25 FTEs offshore based on all these metrics, and I'm going to hire these 25 FTEs. That's what I'm going to ask the offshore partner to provide. And they, of course, faithfully provide those 25 FTEs, and they focus upon making those FTEs really productive, efficient, and so on. But the incentive to innovation is not necessarily there. So, see, the outcome-based metrics, which is a whole different way of looking at things, is one way that you can get offshore partners to look at innovation and improvements as opposed to performing the tasks. Let me kind of illustrate this further by getting into a quick case study here. Okay, here is a company that I looked at a while ago, and this company is a product company that markets security products, and these are the details. They were doing tech support for voice, email, and chat, and about 350 support agents. I'll tell you what happened in year number one. In year number one, what they were doing was the normal offshore FTEs, person month based approach. So the customer provided all the metrics, and they set up minimum CSATs and response times, and the focus was really all on the call handling and the efficiencies as opposed to innovation, and there was no particular incentive other than to meet whatever metrics were set up. So what did this mean? Let's look at this objectively. Let's look at this from a vendor perspective. If the call volume went up, the only way that they would be able to handle that based upon this model is to increase the numbers of people, which simply meant that automatically the cost of providing support for the outsourcing company went up. After a year of trying this, the outsourcer was really unhappy with the situation. So they looked at the outcome-based approach and then went on to implement it. So what is really different about outcome-based approach? You know, we all do that in varying degrees, but this is a conscious decision to go to outcome-based. And the metrics now were set up on not just handling calls, but call resolution. You know, the VP of support is at the end of the day is responsible for making sure the calls are resolved, not just the calls are handled within a certain amount of time. And Francoise talked about CSAT, and the metric was set up not just meeting the CSAT numbers, but how much improvement are you doing on an ongoing basis. So we will pay you based upon the improvements and first call resolution, not just meeting the CSAT. So there's a whole different orientation now. So the vendor is incentivized to improve the whole processes. So here are all the vendor actions that they took. They resorted to automation, they resort to improving the knowledge bases, FAQs, and of course productivity improvement that they were really focused upon as well. Now, on the cost of support after a year of this, actually they studied this, the support for the support of the cost of support actually came down for the outsourcer. At the same time, the vendor revenues improved as well because they were paid more based upon the improvement in CSAT. Okay, let's talk. It's not all a bed of roses here. Trying to implement outcome based, and there were definitely resistance by the vendor because the time and materials of the FTE based model is more predictable, more proven. I have so many people, so I get so much revenues, and they were quite happy. But this was tied to outcomes and improvements, and so this was a bit of an unknown until it was proven over a period of time. And this also meant that you had to go through carefully coming up with metrics that were palatable to both parties. Contracts had to be revised, and you know, the vendor would naturally feel, look, if you're measuring me on these kinds of metrics, I'm going to do what I want. Leave me alone, if you will. Maybe it's an extreme, but that's sort of the thought process. But at the same time, the outsourcer would want to know what the heck is happening, get visibility. Those are all things that need to be worked out, and they were. And this really meant that the organization on both sides needed to rework who was responsible for what. That took a whole lot of work and a lot of details. And in this particular case, though, they transferred a lot of the responsibility to the outsourcing partner offshore. Luckily, the whole thing worked out well. Again, I want to let you guys know that it takes a lot of work trying to put this together. Okay, let's look at these are, on the left-hand side, these are the activity-based metrics, and these are familiar to all of you. I won't go through that all over again. But in the outcome-based, I touched on these things. In addition to that, some people have put in what is the customer lifetime value. In essence, the thought process of outcome-based is, look, I am the VP of support. I've measured a certain way, and I'm going to measure you, the outsourcing service provider, in the same way that I'm measured. So we're all in it together, as opposed to you now have the T&M, and I've got the ultimate responsibility. That there is a disconnect. So there is nothing hugely magical about this, but rearranging the thought process and the metrics is really the key thought about this outcome-based. But in the instances where I have seen people actually implement this has provided a way for the partner to not only innovate, but to share in the rewards of the innovation. If the outsourcer actually got more value, they should be willing to share that. And I have seen even people setting up metrics such as, well, the market value of the company or that particular organization contribution increased so much, given that, look, you are our true partner, so we are going to share some portion of that. So that's kind of the thought process behind that. Okay.
So, Sath, I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Francoise.
Sure.
On the previous slide, when you were showing us your metrics, right? I mean, these metrics are very much metrics that we want to use for ourselves anyway, right? So it's not like a big revolution.
Absolutely. These are metrics that we ourselves do use it, and we are held responsible by our own organization. But surprisingly, I would say 80-90% of the outsourcing contracts are written as so many people. Those metrics don't get transferred over to the outsourcing offshore service provider organizations, simply because the FTE kind of a model is easy to put together, and it's much easier. But I agree with you. I think it should be the same. They are no different than the metrics that if you are the VP support, those are the same things that you should be holding your service provider responsible for. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. So, but again, the translating that takes work. I don't know, a lot of work, takes work. In some cases, maybe not a lot. In some other cases, maybe a lot. So I think that your point is well taken. They are the exact same metrics. Okay. So getting vendors to innovate using outcome-based metrics, it is not a silver bullet. It may not apply to everybody, but you got to ask all these questions before does it make sense for you, and then there are implementation details that you need to go through. Okay. Another thing, I said earlier that there is no one silver bullet that ultimately results in improved value from offshoring. The other area that I see is skill levels at all levels. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Typically, what I find is the first, I call the honeymoon period, the first 6 months of any contract. So everybody is paying attention to everything, and things seem to go well. But as you enter beyond the honeymoon period, things over time tend to deteriorate. Why is that? People change, products change, processes change, and you may or may not have spent as much time managing the process. But more than that, this particular slide talks about the competency offshore. Most of the time, here's what I find. People spend an awful lot of time worrying about the tech support agent's competencies. That's a given. You should pay attention to that. But what I find is the next level above that tech support group, if you will, whatever the titles are, project manager, center manager, when I have done assessments offshore, I have found that the people who are doing the work are really good, but people have not paid attention to their project managers because those skills are different. They are way beyond technical stuff. Now you got to have management competencies and the ability to interact with the client and so on, right? So it is not that all I'm saying here is you got to pay attention to those competencies. I'm not saying it is universally problematic, but the clients, my clients here in the U.S., don't necessarily spend time on those, should look at those, help them make sure that they are the right people. And sometimes it is just as simple as sitting down and spending a few days with them on managing expectations. How do I operate? How do you operate? Let's make sure we're all on the same page. These are the kinds of things that could be done very simply by somebody when they come over here or you go there, you being the outsourcer, go to the offshore location. You can manage those kinds of things. That goes for, both the project managers, depending upon the size, center managers, and so on. And there have been instances wherein we had to actually either augment their skills or even resort to replacing those people because they just weren't the right people for the job. So key takeaway from this slide, pay attention to above and beyond just the technical competencies in order to make offshoring successful. Okay, turnover is another issue that Francoise mentioned, and this quote really almost echoes what she said earlier. Quite often the attitude is, look, this is a vendor's problem, not mine. And I actually differ from that. It's a majority of that may be the offshore service providers issue, but there are things in your own control. So I want to spend a few minutes here very quickly talking about what they are. First of all, turnover happens for more than just people leaving the organization. There are system-wide turnover. These are turnover that every company plans to rotate their people, and you may want to take a look at that and agree between you and the outsourcing provider how long you would commit, the organization is willing to commit to keep them on your projects, on your account, and so on. And they want to not just have one person stuck in their same job forever. They got to give them career progression and so on. But those things should be coordinated as opposed to ad hoc. So when people talk about turnover rates, there is for the whole center, for the projects, and you should really look at, if the whole center, if they say, look, in my organization, I've got 10% attrition, but in your project, it is 35% attrition. If you're the project manager, it means different things to you. So you need to look at metrics that are applicable to you. Work it out with the offshore service providers. You may actually need to go as far as putting those things in your contract, and then you should take a look at what is in your control and what is in the vendor's control. Okay, so this is a result of a survey. Take a quick look at it. The people focus upon compensation as the item that people are worried about. I mean, this is what do they want and where do people leave one employer and go to the next, and for survey, right? So this turns out to be 7th or 8th, the compensation, but look at all the other things. Some of those are things that the vendor can take care of, but for example, growth opportunities. If you are working in a long-term relationship with an offshore service provider, you may be able to put in things that to help grow the people, give them career plans in your own center offshore, right? So those are things that you could do.
Sath, this is Francoise. So in this graph also, just the same comment as I had about graphics, right?
Right.
About the metrics, right?
Right.
This graph, I know it comes from DataQuest India. You indicate that at the bottom of the slide, but I don't think it's really that different from what you would see onshore, right?
Absolutely. This is really what I share with people, I mean, in terms of employee motivations and what they want, these are very close to the same things. Absolutely, you're right. So I think that what I'm saying to you is, work with your partner. Again, the implementation, company policies and all of that in satisfying many of these needs will have to be implemented by your offshore service provider, but you need to work with them. You need to work with them. Okay. Um, the other things that you can do to address turnover, you may want to you may want to proactively have some additional staffing, meaning maybe you want to have some moderate overstaffing, and I'm not talking about 20-30%, 1 or 2 or 3 people to backfill, so that if somebody turns over, you can quickly replace them. I know some, I don't want to speak for the vendors, but there are some vendors who have said, look, I'm willing to keep 1 or 2 people on the bench at my cost without charging you. Again, each company does it differently. You need to work with your vendor if somebody would, if your vendor would do that for you or not. We have put in retention packages. Again, these are on bonuses, depends upon the project and then the criticality and so on. These things work exactly the same way as they do here in the U.S. So retention packages, if you work through this critical time frame or project, you will get X amount of bonus, that kind of stuff. Again, there are the details of that can be worked out, but that's just a thought there. I'm then talking about advancement and career path. If you are able to give them, again, you can work it out with your provider, and together you can help improve the turnover, reduce the turnover. Okay. One of the other things I find is level of people here in the U.S. understanding really what it takes to manage offshoring. So this is a quote from a recent survey that we did about what they find challenging in offshoring. So I will be quiet for about 10 seconds here so you guys can read the quote. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next thing. Again, we can, there are the whole workshop that are run on this thing. How do you manage cultural differences, communication, and so on. But the thing to take away is you got to lead differently. You got to understand that cultural differences actually exist, and you as in the outsourcing managers need to understand how to manage your offshore team and vice versa. Okay, so that's the key takeaway from here. Okay. Conducting regular audits. I talked about earlier changes that happen. Maybe things were running fine initially when you put this in place, put the offshoring in place, but over time, every organization, everything changes, right? Products change, people change, your own strategy may change, processes may change. So what worked 6 months ago, a year ago, 3 years ago may or may not work today, and then there is there is frustration, saying that, oh gosh, offshoring is not working for me anymore. So whether it worked at all initially may or may not, but what I submit to you is in the audits that we have done for people, we have found several things that they could implement very quickly, readily, that could significantly enhance the value that they got and also make the life easier for the offshore vendors as well. So here is an approach. In fact, this is the approach that I use for audits. First of all, this audit needs to be objective. So it is not like the vendor proving to the client that, look, I'm doing my job, you're not doing yours, or vice versa, which is the question that I ask quite often. Sath, come in here, help us. The first thing I want to do is to replace this vendor because they haven't done a good job for us in the last however long. That may or may not be the case. So you should really take an objective assessment of the health of the relationship. Okay, that is what I mean by it is a 360-degree view. You should look at it from the vendor's perspective. You should look at it from the client's perspective. What are the things that are working? What are the things that are not working? And so the ones that, I find that there are a lot of stuff that's working. And those things you need to replicate across and make it more successful and identify the things where you are having problems and find solutions to those. And you come up with a roadmap for the implementation and go on and implement. See if I have it. No, I think that's okay. So this is what I find one of the things that that quite often people miss. But they can get a lot of value out of doing an audit of the offshore operations and then taking action. This is not in place of the regular quarterly business reviews and monthly meetings and other exchanges that happen. They're totally independent of all of that, taking an objective view and figuring out where and how people can improve things.
So, Sath, do you think for these audits, do you think that people can basically self-audit?
Francois, I think it depends. Some of them, I think, can, frankly. It depends on the organization. Do they have the ability, do they have the bandwidth and the expertise to be able to pull off these audits? Absolutely. Some organizations will be able to do it on their own. They just need to find somebody within their organization that can take this on and run with it and meet all those things. But quite often what clients tell me is that we couldn't afford to be objective on our own. And we simply don't have the bandwidth to go spend 2 to 3 months, 2 to 3 calendar months. It may only take 4 to 6 weeks to organize this thing and then come out with a series of steps that we could implement. So the summary answer to you is it's situation dependent, Francois. I submit that some of them would be able to do it on their own. Some of them may not be able to. Did that kind of
Thank you.
give you in-between answer?
Yeah. So right answer is always it depends, right?
Yeah. Consultant answer is always depends. But that's the truth of the matter, I mean, it's situation dependent. Okay. So I'm coming to the towards the end of my formal presentation here. Let's kind of take a summary of the kinds of things that I'm really talking about. Should you bring back some projects that I talked to in a quick summary here? I'm talking there about project selection criteria. Are you even offshoring the right projects to get started? Should you bring back, it's really something about should you redo the project mix that you're offshoring and look at your roadmap differently. And getting vendors to innovate, one of the approaches, not the only approach, is the outcome-based metrics, which is at the end of the day, that's really all about simply having them held responsible for the same metrics. Someone like Francoise would be held responsible for the VP of support. So that really fosters innovation and actually partnership much more than that as well. Okay. Assuring the right skills offshore at all levels. This is about beyond the technical skills, making sure that the management skills exist and you need to work with them. Reducing turnover. We talked about the motivations of people offshore are very similar to what it is here. And I bet you if you run that survey in other parts of the world besides India, you might come up with some pretty close corollary to what that is. So we need to manage the staff just like we manage our own. And my point here is you need to work with the vendors. Don't throw it over the wall and say, this is your problem. This, change it and say, this is our problem. Let's go figure out how the heck we solve it. That brings me to understanding your offshore service providers, their culture, them understanding your sense of urgencies and pain points and working with you. And you got to meet somewhere in the middle. And conducting an audit can help you identify areas that helps you overall. And in the audits that I have done, people have seen improvements of anywhere from 25 to 200% over a period of a year or so of implementing those ideas. Again, it's situation dependent. Some people can do it on their own. Some people might need external help. Okay, with that, we can go to Q&A.
All right, Sath. So I have a bunch of questions, and I know we have limited time. So I will answer as many as possible. Well, I will ask you as many as possible, and you will answer as many as possible now, right? For all the attendees, if you have additional questions, please do use the chat feature and let me know what your questions are, and I will filter them in real time. I don't have a problem doing that. All right, so the first question is one that I could have asked. It's one that says, at the beginning we talked about the fact that a lot of my clients certainly say that they don't get as high satisfaction ratings for work that's done offshore as opposed to onshore. So the question is kind of a philosophical question. Is it possible for the offshore staff to perform at the same level as the onshore staff?
Francois, yes, it is possible, and I have seen companies that meet the same metrics that we have set for people here onshore. Now,
so we should not just give up and say, oh, well, the offshore, they can do it.
Correct. I would absolutely agree with you. It is possible to do that, but I will add the caveat that given that offshoring means that you have cultural differences, you have time zone differences, and you have skill variation differences, and even organizational differences, right? All of those things are there. It takes work to make sure all those things are dealt with. That's what I talk about in all of these various bullet points in here, assuming that you have addressed whatever is applicable in your own situation. And philosophically, the answer is absolutely yes, and I also have seen companies doing it.
Okay. All right. So a second question, which I like because it's kind of upside down from what we have been talking about so far. So it seems, looking at your presentation and the way I introduced it, certainly, that we are really speaking about the perspective of the onshore company, right?
Correct. Yes.
But the question is the reverse. So it says from the perspective of the offshore vendor or team, I suppose, right? If it's
right
within the company, right? So from the perspective of offshore, when you work with these folks, when you do these audits, etc., what are the top issues that they tell you they have working with us? See what I mean?
Yeah. Let me repeat the question though. This presentation has been put together with the view of addressing the issues that the onshore companies have in offshoring. So that's the perspective where it's coming. But if I talk to the offshore teams, what are their perspectives and what are their top 3 issues with the client, so to speak, right?
That is the question, yes.
Okay, so in no particular order, Francois and the rest of you in the audience, here is what comes to my mind. Surprisingly, so the number one issue that I get is I ask questions I don't get answers in a timely fashion, if you can believe that. so that I get by the way, I'm coming from the perspective I've done audits of working with a range of companies across the board. That's one of the things that comes up quite often. I think that they feel either unappreciated or underappreciated, and not well understood as to what their own issues are. And then and this comes from the fact that I've seen all of these people putting an awful lot of time. They spend they work very hard at it, and they want their clients to be happy, but at the end of the day there are still issues. So they get really frustrated. um, I will Let's see, what else do I see?
So when you say they feel frustrated, it's because they never get balanced feedback, or they never get positive feedback, or I mean, how could we change that perception? Right?
Yeah, I think there are really two things that one could do. I think that there really needs to be both timely and honest and actionable feedback given to them.
Okay.
Okay, and I have, having worked with so many companies over the last 20 years, and I bet you, I would say to a person, they would want to implement those that their clients are asking them to go do.
Okay. All right. So I'm kind of keeping an eye on the time.
Sure.
And I think I'll ask you two more questions. So one is a little bit depressing, so I'll ask it to you first, so we can end on a not depressing note. So the depressing question is, when you conduct your audits, how frequently do you find that the offshore vendor must simply be terminated? In other words, there's no hope, right?
I have not found any instance wherein on day one I would say the vendor is completely unsuited, they must be terminated immediately. No, I've not found any in the many audits that I have done. That said, I have said on multiple occasions, let us implement these particular improvement plans. Let's take a look at it in 6 months to 1 year, and then make a determination if you should continue to work with them or find a replacement.
And would your clients at this point say, yeah, we do have the patience and fortitude to wait 6 months to a year, or do they just say, well, forget that, it's too hard, we're moving on?
You know what? The ones that I have worked with, they have said, okay, you know what? They have said, yes, we will take the 6 months to 1 year. Remember, I mean, they went into this relationship with somebody for some good reasons up at the start of it. It simply not worked out. And the other reason that they're also willing to do that is many of the issues, actionable items, I would say at least half, if not more, are not at the vendor location. They are at the outsourcer's action items. So given that, how could they say it is all somebody else's problem?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So in the past, I have found that they are willing to say, yes, I will take the 6 months to 1 year and then go back and reassess the relationship, whether we should keep or not keep the whole relationship. Do we simply terminate and find a new vendor? Yes.
All right, so let me ask you the last question. I think I have an idea what you're going to say, but I'll ask anyway.
Sure.
So a lot of, even though when we started the presentation, I tried to be careful to say this could apply to offshore staff as well as offshore vendors, right? It seems that a lot of the discussion we've had is really around offshore vendors, so outsourcers, right? But do you think most of these issues around, feeling underappreciated and having maybe good competency at the support engineer level but not at the management level. Do you think all of these things would apply as well to offshore staff?
If you mean when you say offshore staff, you're talking about the same company having their subsidiary, that model?
Same company, yeah, different location.
Yeah. The degrees might vary, from one company to another company, just like the degree to which these things are true would vary from one outsourcing provider to another one. But the same concepts, on the broadly speaking, yes, they apply. The things that I have presented here applies to offshoring in general as opposed to outsourcing versus their own company.
Excellent. I think we've gone through, maybe not all the ways the questions were expressed, but all of the questions. So I'll let you close. Do you want to do that, Sath, or let me know if you want me to do it?
Go ahead. Let me know. Go ahead, Francoise, so you can.
All right. So I want to thank everybody for attending. It's great that you guys were able to make it. We understand that as a result of what Sath has said, you may want to explore these issues in a little bit more detail. So we are happy, both Sath and myself, we are more than happy to talk to you about your situation, have a complimentary consultation on what it is that you need, or questions that you may have. Just reach out to either one of us. Our contact information is there on the screen, and we'll email that to you as well. Good luck with your offshoring efforts, and thank you very much, Sath, for sharing the experience that you acquired through many, many days of slogging through these audits and proposing solutions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Thanks for the opportunity.
Have a good day.